The first sign something was wrong came at 3:47 hours, when Senior Airman Kestrel Kess Thorne noticed the radar signature that shouldn't exist. Her weathered fingers traced the green blip on her console screen inside the cramped air traffic control tower at Kandahar Airfield, Afghanistan. The contact appeared for 3 seconds, vanished, then reappeared 2 miles closer. No flight plan. No radio contact. No IFF transponder signal. "Ghost contact, bearing 270, 12 miles out," she whispered into her headset, her voice carrying the practiced calm of someone who'd spent 6 years watching Afghanistan's dangerous skis. The other controllers barely glanced up. Kess had a reputation for seeing things that weren't there: phantom aircraft, sensor ghosts, the nervous imaginings of someone who'd lost too many friends to enemy fire. But Kess knew aircraft. She'd flown combat missions in Iraq before a crash ended her pilot career and left her with a reconstructed left leg and chronic pain that the VA rated at 30% disability. Now she guided others through the same hostile airspace that had nearly claimed her life. The younger controllers called her Grandma behind her back, despite being only 32. They saw a washed-up pilot playing with radar screens. They didn't see the woman who'd earned the Distinguished Flying Cross for actions she never discussed. The mystery contact moved again. This time, the signature was massive, larger than any aircraft in their inventory. It painted solid on her screen for 7 seconds before fragmenting into multiple smaller contacts, each one moving at impossible speeds. Kess felt ice in her veins. She'd seen this pattern before, in classified briefings that most of her colleagues weren't cleared to attend. "Tower, we have multiple unknowns, fast movers converging on the airfield," she announced, her voice cutting through the ambient chatter. This time, heads turned. Master Sergeant Rodriguez looked over her shoulder at the scope, his expression shifting from skepticism to concern. The base's proximity alarm should have been screaming. The automated defense system should have been tracking these contacts. Instead, silence filled the tower except for the steady hum of cooling fans and the distant rumble of generators. Outside the reinforced windows, the pre-dawn darkness revealed nothing but the scattered lights of the military compound and the mountains beyond. Something was coming. Something that could fool their best detection systems and approach undetected until it was almost too late. In 6 minutes, the morning shift change would bring 200 personnel out of their hardened shelters and into the open. Kess stared at her screen, watching death approach at Mach 2, and realized she might be the only one who could see it coming. The radio crackled to life with a transmission that would change everything. "Kandahar Tower, this is Reaper Flight. We're painted by multiple targeting radars. Request immediate defensive posture. Something's out here with us." Master Sergeant Elena Rodriguez had commanded night shifts at Kandahar for 3 tours, and she'd learned to trust her controllers' instincts even when the technology failed them. Watching Kestrel Thorne's rigid posture and white knuckles on the radio microphone, she made a decision that would save lives. "Battle stations," she ordered, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd seen too many midnight emergencies become dawn disasters. The tower erupted into controlled chaos. Controllers grabbed headsets and switched to combat frequencies, while Rodriguez activated the base-wide alert system. Red lights bathed the operations center as sirens wailed across the compound, their haunting notes echoing off concrete barriers and aircraft hangars. But the automated defense grid remained silent, its sophisticated sensors showing clear skis. "Reaper Flight, Kandahar Tower," Kess transmitted, her fingers dancing across backup communication systems. "We're not showing your contacts on primary radar. Switch to secondary frequency and give me a full picture." "Captain Marcus, Reaper," Walsh's voice crackled back through static-laden radio waves. "Tower, I've got 4, no 6 fast movers closing on the base from multiple vectors. They're jamming our radar, but visual contact confirms hostile aircraft. Request permission to engage." Rodriguez leaned over Kess's shoulder, studying the bizarre radar picture. The contacts moved in patterns no human pilot could survive: instant direction changes, impossible acceleration curves, flight paths that defied physics. Either our equipment's completely compromised, or we're dealing with technology we don't understand, she muttered. Kess's hands moved with practiced efficiency across her control panel, switching between radar frequencies and backup systems. Her training as a combat pilot served her well. She understood both sides of air-to-air combat. Reaper flight, be advised the bogies are using some kind of stealth technology we haven't seen before. They're masking their signatures between our radar sweeps. The base loudspeaker crackled. All personnel, this is not a drill. Seek immediate hard shelter. Incoming hostile aircraft detected. 200 service members scattered across the compound, running for reinforced bunkers and hardened aircraft shelters. The morning shift change had been scheduled to begin in 4 minutes. Instead of standing exposed in formation, they dove for cover. Outside the tower windows, the eastern horizon showed the first pale hints of dawn. Kess watched her scope, tracking the impossible contacts as they wove between the mountains surrounding Kandahar. Her reconstructed leg throbbed. It always ached before weather changes, but this felt different. This felt like the pain she'd experienced in that cockpit 6 years ago, watching the ground rush up to meet her damaged F-16. "Reaper lead, what's your weapon status?" she asked. "Full loadout tower. AIM 120s and AIM 9s, but these bogies aren't flying like anything in our threat books." There, Walsh's transmission cut to static. The radar screen exploded with new contacts. Dozens of them, all converging on the base simultaneously. The silence that followed Reaper lead's cut transmission stretched for exactly 13 seconds. Kess counted them, a habit from her pilot days when every second mattered. Then the radio erupted with overlapping voices, call signs she recognized from the daily flight roster, pilots she'd guided safely through these skis dozens of times. "Mayday, Mayday, Reaper 2 is hit, I'm going down." "Tower Falcon flight is engaged, multiple hostiles, they're everywhere." "Kandahar Tower, this is Guardian 1-1. We're launching emergency intercept. Give me vectors to the fight." Kess's fingers flew across her console, switching between frequencies, coordinating the chaos that combat always became. But something was wrong with the picture developing on her screen. The hostile contacts moved with inhuman precision, executing maneuvers that should have torn any aircraft apart. They appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking from impossible angles. All flights, this is Kandahar Tower," she transmitted, her voice cutting through the radio chatter with hard-earned authority. "Bogies are using advanced electronic countermeasures. Trust your eyes, not your instruments. Repeat, visual contact only." Rodriguez grabbed the direct line to CENTCOM, reporting the attack up the chain of command. But help was hours away, and the battle was happening now. Outside, she could see muzzle flashes from ground-based air defenses as they engaged targets only some people could see. Captain Walsh's voice returned, strained and breathless. "Tower, Reaper lead. I've got one of these things in visual, it's like nothing I've ever seen. Triangular, completely silent, moving like it weighs nothing." A pause filled with the sound of afterburners and missile launches. Jesus Christ, it just vanished. Literally vanished. Kess stared at her radar scope, watching the impossible dance of contacts that appeared and disappeared at will. Her pilot's mind processed the tactical situation with clinical precision. Their enemies possessed technology that rendered conventional air defense useless. Stealth capabilities beyond anything in known inventories. Flight characteristics that violated physics as she understood it. But there was something else, a pattern in the chaos. The hostiles weren't randomly attacking. They were herding the defensive fighters, forcing them into predetermined engagement zones. Kess had seen this tactic before, in classified briefings about asymmetric warfare and unconventional threats. "All flights break off engagement," she ordered, knowing she was exceeding her authority but trusting her instincts. You're being herded into a trap. Climb to Angels 20 and maintain defensive spread. Tower Guardian Lead. That's not standard intercept protocol. Guardian Lead, I'm a former F-16 pilot with 6 years combat experience. Trust me on this one. Kess keyed her microphone again, her voice carrying new urgency. Something big is coming. These fast movers are just the opening act. The morning sun crested the Hindu Kush Mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. In that beautiful light, Kess saw her radar scope paint the largest aircraft signature she'd ever witnessed, descending from high altitude directly toward Kandahar airfield. The real attack was about to begin. The massive contact on Kess's screen defied every parameter in the threat identification manual. Wingspan estimated at over 400 feet, moving at 700 knots, descending from 50,000 feet with the steady inevitability of an avalanche. But what made her blood freeze was the complete absence of heat signature or engine noise. This thing flew in absolute silence. All stations, this is Kandahar Tower, she broadcast on emergency frequency. We have a super heavy hostile inbound, bearing 090, altitude descending through Angels 30. All defensive units engage immediately. The base's Patriot missile batteries swiveled toward the threat, their tracking radars searching for a target that existed on only one scope, hers. The automated systems couldn't lock onto something their programming didn't recognize as possible. Rodriguez worked her communications panel frantically, coordinating with regional air defense networks across Afghanistan. AWACS, this is Kandahar. We need immediate support. We're under attack by unknown aircraft using advanced stealth technology. The response came from a board-sounding radar operator 300 miles away. Kandahar Tower, we show clear skis in your sector. No hostile contacts detected. Then your equipment's being jammed, Rodriguez snapped back. We have visual confirmation of hostile aircraft and active combat in progress. In her peripheral vision, Kess watched the tactical situation deteriorate. The smaller hostile contacts had forced their defensive fighters into a perfect killing box: high altitude, limited maneuvering room, insufficient fuel for extended combat. Classic air superiority tactics, executed with precision that spoke of extensive intelligence gathering and mission planning. Captain Walsh's voice came through static. Tower, Reaper Lead. I'm Winchester on missiles and low on fuel. These things are playing with us. They're herding us like sheep. Reaper Lead, RTB immediately, Kess ordered. Land and rearm, this isn't over. Negative Tower, I'm not leaving you defenseless. Kess felt something stir in her chest, the same protective instinct that had driven her to fly dangerous missions in Iraq, the same stubborn refusal to abandon her responsibilities that had led to her crash. She studied the massive approaching contact, running calculations in her head. Speed, altitude, trajectory. It would reach the base in 90 seconds. All ground units take cover immediately, she announced. Impact in 90 seconds. This is not a drill. The tower shook as something large passed overhead. Not the hostile aircraft, but an F-22 Raptor flying at dangerously low altitude, its afterburners painting blue flames against the morning sky. Kess had never seen one of the Air Force's most advanced fighters at Kandahar before. Kandahar Tower, Phoenix 1-1 requesting immediate vectors to hostile contact, came a calm female voice over the radio. Phoenix 1-1, negative, RTB immediately. This threat is beyond current engagement parameters. Kess paused, studying her scope. Unless you can see what everyone else is missing. The response chilled her. Tower, I can see them just fine. Give me those vectors. Kess stared at her radar display, watching the impossible contacts dance around conventional physics while the massive bogey continued its inexorable approach. Only one person besides herself seemed capable of tracking these threats visually. She keyed her microphone with steady hands. Phoenix 1-1, target bearing 090, range 15 miles, altitude Angels 25 and descending. Caution advised, this one's different from the others. Copy tower, different how? Kess watched the massive signature on her screen, noting how it moved with deliberate purpose rather than the erratic patterns of the smaller craft. Phoenix 1-1, this contact is 400 feet wingspan, completely silent, and our automated defenses can't lock onto it. Whatever technology they're using, it's beyond anything in our databases. Understood tower, Phoenix 1-1 is engaged. Through the tower windows, Kess caught sight of the F-22 as it climbed toward its target, a gray ghost against the brightening sky, its angular surfaces designed to defeat radar just as her enemy's craft apparently were. But there was something different about how this particular pilot flew, a smoothness and precision that reminded her of her own combat flying. Phoenix 1-1, be advised multiple fast movers are still active in your area. They've been herding our fighters into engagement zones. Copy that, I've got visual on 2 of them now. They're maintaining distance, watching the engagement. A pause filled with the sound of systems activating. Tower, requesting permission to break engagement protocols. Rodriguez leaned over Kess's shoulder. What's she mean by that? Kess understood immediately. Standard air-to-air engagement doctrine called for beyond visual range missile shots followed by defensive maneuvering. But against enemies using technology that defeated radar-guided weapons, those protocols became suicide. Phoenix 1-1, cleared to engage by any means necessary. Roger that tower, Phoenix 1-1 is going knife fighting. The F-22 disappeared from view, climbing into the dawn sky to face an enemy that shouldn't exist. Kess watched her scope, tracking the impossible dance about to begin 25,000 feet above their heads. The massive hostile contact continued its approach, now only 8 miles out and descending steadily. In the distance, she could hear the deep rumble of more aircraft launching from other bases, but they were minutes away. Whatever happened in the next few minutes would determine whether Kandahar Airfield survived the morning intact. Phoenix 1-1, target is now bearing 085, range 5 miles descending through Angels 20. You should have visual contact. Tower, I see it. My God, what is that thing? For the first time since the engagement began, Kess heard uncertainty in Phoenix 1-1's voice. She stared at her radar screen, watching the massive contact level off at 15,000 feet, directly above the airfield. At this altitude and distance, everyone on the base should be able to see it clearly. But when she looked through the tower windows at the empty morning sky, she saw nothing at all. The contradiction between her radar screen and the empty sky above made Kess question her own sanity for a heartbeat. Then her training kicked in. Trust instruments when vision fails. Trust vision when instruments fail. But when both conflict, trust experience. She'd spent 6 years learning to read the signs that kept pilots alive in hostile airspace. Phoenix 1-1, report your visual contact, she transmitted. Tower, I have eyes on the primary target. It's static filled the channel for several seconds. It's like looking at empty air that bends light. I can see the outline, but it's almost transparent. And it's huge, bigger than a C5 galaxy. Kess felt her pulse quicken. Optical camouflage technology had been theoretical until this moment. But her radar showed the contact clearly, a solid return painting consistent signatures. Phoenix 1-1, can you achieve weapons lock? Negative tower. My fire control radar can't paint it, but heat seekers might work if I get close enough. Phoenix 1-1's voice carried the calm focus of a veteran pilot adapting to impossible circumstances. I'm going to try something unconventional. Phoenix, whatever you're thinking, remember you're outnumbered and facing unknown capabilities. Copy tower, but they made one mistake, they let me see them. Through her headset, Kess heard the distinctive sound of an F-22's engines transitioning to supercruise, as Phoenix 1-1 accelerated toward her target. On radar, the smaller hostile contacts began converging on the Raptor's position, their movement patterns shifting from observation to active engagement. Rodriguez grabbed Kess's shoulder. "We've got movement on the perimeter. Ground units report unidentified personnel approaching the fence line from multiple directions." The morning sky erupted into chaos as tracer rounds from base defense weapons lit up the air around invisible targets. The ground-based radar-controlled guns fired at empty air, their targeting computers confused by contacts that appeared solid on some frequencies and transparent on others. "All ground units, hold fire unless you have visual confirmation," Kess ordered, knowing the command exceeded her authority but recognizing the tactical necessity. "You're shooting at ghosts." Captain Walsh's voice crackled through static. "Tower, Reaper lead. I've got visual on Phoenix 1-1's engagement. She's flying patterns I've never seen before, like she's fighting something only she can see." Kess studied her radar scope, watching the impossible aerial ballet 20,000 feet above. Phoenix 1-1's F-22 traced complex three-dimensional curves through the sky, engaging targets that appeared and disappeared on her screen like mirages. But there was purpose in the movement, a tactical precision that spoke of extensive combat experience against unconventional threats. "Phoenix 1-1, what's your assessment of hostile capabilities?" "Tower, they're fast and maneuverable, but they're not omnipotent. I've forced 2 of them into defensive positions." A pause filled with the sound of missile launches. "Splash 1, confirm, Splash 1 hostile contact." For the first time since the engagement began, one of the mystery contacts disappeared permanently from Kess's scope. The morning sun climbed higher, burning off the last traces of dawn mist and revealing the full scope of the battle developing around Kandahar airfield. What had begun as a mysterious radar contact was evolving into the most sophisticated aerial assault Kess had ever witnessed, and she was one of only 2 people who could see it happening. The successful engagement changed everything. Phoenix 1-1 had proven the hostile aircraft weren't invulnerable, just technologically superior. But more importantly, she demonstrated tactical instincts that reminded Kess of her own combat flying, the ability to read patterns in chaos and exploit enemy weaknesses that others couldn't see. "Phoenix 1-1, outstanding work. What's your tactical assessment?" "Tower, these things rely on stealth and confusion, but they can't maintain invisibility while maneuvering aggressively. When they turn hard or accelerate rapidly, they become visible for 2 to 3 seconds. Phoenix 1-1's breathing was controlled despite the high-G maneuvering. I'm marking their positions with smoke rockets for the other flights." Kess watched her scope as Phoenix 1-1's F-22 traced brilliant white contrails through the combat zone, marking invisible enemies for fighters whose radar couldn't track them. It was an improvised solution that demonstrated the kind of tactical innovation that separated good pilots from legendary ones. All flights, follow Phoenix 1-1 smoke markers. Engage targets of opportunity, but be aware these hostiles can vanish without warning." Captain Walsh acknowledged immediately. "Tower, Reaper lead copies. I've got visual on the smoke trails now, moving to engage." The tide of battle shifted as conventional fighters began scoring hits on previously untouchable targets. 3 more hostile contacts disappeared from Kess's scope in rapid succession, their advanced stealth technology useless once their positions were marked by Phoenix 1-1's unorthodox tactics. But the largest contact, the 400-foot wingspan aircraft that had been approaching steadily, suddenly accelerated toward the base at nearly Mach 1. On her scope, Kess watched it descend rapidly, its massive signature growing larger as it closed the final distance to Kandahar. "Phoenix 1-1, the big one is making its run. Bearing 070, 3 miles out, descending through Angels 10. I see it, Tower. This is what they were waiting for, The small craft were just clearing a path for the main event. Phoenix 1-1's F-22 broke off from the general engagement and climbed to intercept. "I'm going to need every missile on the base to help with this one." Rodriguez activated the Emergency Weapons Release Protocol, authorizing all defensive systems to engage the massive approaching target. Patriot batteries swiveled toward the threat, their sophisticated tracking radars finally achieving intermittent lock-on, as the huge aircraft's stealth systems degraded under the stress of rapid maneuvering. All defensive batteries, prioritize the large contact bearing 070. This is your primary target. The morning sky filled with missile contrails as every air defense system on the base engaged simultaneously. But Kess watched her scope with growing concern. The massive hostile aircraft absorbed direct hits without changing course or speed, its signature remaining solid and unwavering as it approached the final miles to Kandahar airfield. Phoenix 1-1, multiple hits confirmed on primary target, no apparent damage assessment. Copy Tower, I'm seeing the same thing. Whatever this thing is built from, it's tougher than anything in our inventory. The massive aircraft passed directly over the airfield at 5,000 feet, its invisible bulk casting no shadow despite the brilliant morning sunlight. Kess felt the tower shake from acoustic pressure waves generated by something that flew in complete silence, a contradiction that violated everything she understood about aerodynamics. But instead of attacking, the huge aircraft continued past the base and began climbing toward the mountains. On her scope, Kess watched as all the remaining smaller contacts broke off their engagements and followed the larger craft toward the peaks of the Hindu Kush. "All flights hostiles are withdrawing. Do not pursue beyond visual range." Phoenix 1-1's voice came through clearly. "Tower, Phoenix 1-1 requesting permission to shadow the retreating contacts." "Negative, Phoenix. RTB for debrief. We need to understand what just happened here." As the mysterious aircraft disappeared beyond the mountain peaks, Kess realized the engagement had lasted exactly 47 minutes. 47 minutes during which she'd coordinated the defense of Kandahar airfield against technology that shouldn't exist, guided by instincts honed in combat zones most people never saw. But more than that, she'd witnessed something unprecedented, a pilot whose skills matched the impossible enemies they'd faced. Phoenix 1-1 had turned the tide of battle through tactical innovation and sheer flying ability, demonstrating the kind of expertise that came from facing unconventional threats before. As the all-clear sounded across the base, Kess wondered who Phoenix 1-1 really was and how she'd learned to fight enemies that existed at the edge of possibility. Rodriguez ordered a full damage assessment while emergency crews searched for downed aircraft, but the morning's engagement had ended with 0 friendly casualties, an outcome that should have been impossible given the technological superiority of their attackers. Phoenix 1-1 had made the difference, but Kess couldn't shake the feeling that the mysterious pilot had been as surprised by the enemy's capabilities as everyone else. Kandahar Tower, Phoenix 1-1 requesting priority landing. I've got battle damage and fuel issues. Phoenix 1-1 cleared for immediate approach, runway 27. Emergency equipment is standing by. Kess watched through binoculars as the F-22 Raptor approached the airfield, its normally pristine surfaces scarred by what looked like energy weapon impacts, burns that created patterns she'd never seen on combat aircraft. The damage told a story of close-quarters aerial combat against weapons that didn't exist in any intelligence database. As the Raptor touched down and rolled toward the flight line, Kess prepared for the debrief that would follow. Standard protocol required detailed interviews with all personnel involved in the engagement, but she suspected this particular battle would be classified far above her security clearance within hours. Her suspicions proved correct when 3 black SUVs arrived at the flight line before Phoenix 1-1 had even shut down her engines. Men in civilian clothes with military bearing surrounded the aircraft, establishing a security perimeter that included everyone who'd been involved in the morning's events. Senior Airman Thorne, report to the operations center immediately, came the order over her headset. Rodriguez caught her arm as she prepared to leave the tower. Whatever they ask you in there, remember you saved a lot of lives this morning. Phoenix 1-1 couldn't have done it without someone who could see what others couldn't. The operations center had been transformed into a temporary intelligence facility. Tables covered with classified documents lined the walls, while technicians analyzed radar data from the engagement. At the center of it all sat Phoenix 1-1, still in her flight suit, facing a panel of officers whose rank insignia indicated they'd flown in from very high up the chain of command. Kess recognized the pilot immediately, though she'd never seen her before. Major Arya Blackwood, call sign Phoenix, a name whispered in certain circles, associated with missions that officially never happened. The woman who'd earned 3 Distinguished Flying Crosses and a Congressional Medal of Honor for actions that remained classified. The pilot who'd been presumed dead after a mission in Syria 2 years earlier. Senior Airman Thorne, the lead intelligence officer, acknowledged her presence. Your role as controller during this morning's engagement was exemplary. Major Blackwood has specifically requested that you be included in this debrief. Phoenix, Major Blackwood, looked up from her mission reports with eyes that held the same haunted depth Kess recognized in her own mirror. Combat veterans who'd seen too much, lost too many friends, carried scars that never fully healed. You tracked them when no one else could, Blackwood said, her voice carrying respect earned through shared experience. How? Kess chose her words carefully, aware that everything she said would be analyzed and classified. The contacts moved in patterns I'd seen before in briefings about asymmetric threats. But more than that, they flew like pilots, not drones or automated systems. They made tactical decisions, adapted to our responses, showed creativity in their engagement protocols. And you've seen similar patterns before. Once, in Iraq, right before I was shot down, Kess met Blackwood's gaze directly. By aircraft that officially didn't exist, using weapons that weren't in any threat database. The intelligence officers exchanged glances that spoke of classified knowledge and compartmentalized secrets. But Blackwood nodded with understanding that came from shared experiences in missions that never appeared in official records. The technology we faced this morning isn't entirely unknown, Blackwood said carefully. Certain elements match patterns we've encountered in other theaters against adversaries who prefer to remain anonymous. Kess understood the careful language of classified operations. Phoenix 1-1, Major Blackwood, had been fighting this shadow war for years, facing enemies whose existence couldn't be acknowledged publicly. Today's engagement at Kandahar had been part of a larger conflict that existed in the spaces between official military operations. What happens now? Kess asked. Now, you continue your duties as an air traffic controller, the lead intelligence officer replied, but with a new security clearance and additional responsibilities. The threats we face require people who can see beyond conventional parameters. Blackwood stood to leave, pausing beside Kess's chair. You saved 200 lives this morning by trusting your instincts when technology failed. That takes a special kind of courage. She handed Kess a small card with a phone number. If you ever want to do more than just watch the fights happen, call this number. As the intelligence officers filed out with their classified reports and digital recordings, Kess remained in the operations center, processing the morning's revelations. The aerial battle had been real, but it was only the visible portion of a conflict that stretched across multiple theaters and involved technologies that challenged everything she thought she knew about modern warfare. Through the windows, she could see maintenance crews examining Phoenix 1-1's damaged F-22, their expressions puzzled by weapon impacts that didn't match any known ordnance. The battle's scars told a story of combat at the edge of technological possibility, fought by pilots whose skills had evolved to match impossible threats. Major Blackwood's card felt heavy in her pocket, an invitation to join a war that officially didn't exist, fought by people whose names never appeared in public records. Kess had spent 6 years recovering from her last combat mission, rebuilding her life around the limitations imposed by her injuries and the trauma of being shot down by enemies that couldn't be acknowledged. But this morning had reminded her of something she'd almost forgotten: the satisfaction of using her skills to protect others, the clarity of purpose that came from standing between danger and the people who depended on her expertise. Phoenix 1-1 had shown her that it was possible to fight enemies that existed beyond conventional understanding, to adapt and overcome even when facing impossible odds. That evening, Kess stood outside the air traffic control tower, watching F-22 Raptors conduct routine patrols above Kandahar airfield. The official incident report would classify the morning's events as an equipment malfunction combined with atmospheric phenomena that created false radar contacts. The battle that had nearly claimed 200 lives would disappear into classified files and compartmentalized briefings. But she would remember. She would remember the moment when her skills had made the difference between survival and disaster, when her ability to see patterns in chaos had guided a legendary pilot through an impossible battle. Most importantly, she would remember that some fights were worth the risk, regardless of personal cost. Rodriguez found her there as the sun set behind the Hindu Kush Mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold that reminded Kess of the morning's desperate engagement. "Any word on when Phoenix 1-1 will be back?" Rodriguez asked. "She's already gone. Classified reassignment." Kess fingered the card in her pocket, feeling the weight of decision. "But I don't think this was the last time we'll deal with threats like this." "You did good today, Kess. I mean that. Whatever those things were, you kept us alive long enough to figure out how to fight them." Kess nodded, watching the routine air patrols continue their endless circuits above the base. Somewhere beyond those mountains, enemies with impossible technology were planning their next move in a war that existed in the shadows of official military operations. And somewhere else, pilots like Major Blackwood were preparing to meet them with skills honed in battles that never made the news. The choice was simple, really. She could return to her routine duties, guiding conventional aircraft through predictable flight patterns, living with the knowledge that greater threats existed beyond her ability to influence them. Or she could step back into the arena where her unique abilities could make a difference, where the skills she developed through pain and loss could serve a purpose larger than personal safety. That night, Kess dialed the number on Major Blackwood's card. "Phoenix Operations, this is Nightingale." "This is Senior Airman Kestrel Thorne, call sign." "Well, I guess I don't have one anymore. Major Blackwood gave me this number." "We've been expecting your call. Stand by for secure connection." The line clicked, and suddenly Kess found herself speaking directly to Major Blackwood, despite the fact that she'd supposedly been transferred to a classified location hundreds of miles away. "I wondered how long it would take you to decide," Blackwood said, her voice carrying the warmth of someone who understood the weight of such choices. "Did you really think you could go back to routine air traffic control after today?" The thought crossed my mind, briefly. Kess watched an F-16 taxi past the tower, its pilot unaware that he was operating in airspace that had been contested by impossible enemies just hours earlier. "But you're right. After seeing what's really out there, normal doesn't feel like an option anymore." "Good, because normal ended the moment you tracked those contacts on your radar screen. The question now is whether you're ready to learn just how deep this goes." Kess thought about her reconstructed leg, the chronic pain that reminded her daily of her last combat mission, the comfortable routine she'd built around her limitations. Then she thought about the morning's battle, the clarity of purpose she'd felt while coordinating Phoenix 1-1's impossible engagement against enemies that shouldn't exist. What would my role be? Ground control for operations you've never heard of, against threats that officially don't exist. You'd be part of a team that includes the best pilots, controllers, and analysts from every service branch. People who have proven they can adapt to impossible circumstances and excel under pressure. And the risks? Considerable. The enemies we face don't respect conventional rules of engagement. They don't limit themselves to military targets, and they don't take prisoners. Blackwood paused, letting the implications settle. But the alternative is leaving the world's security to people who can't see what you saw today. Through her headset, Kess could hear the distant sound of aircraft engines, not the familiar turbofan whine of conventional fighters, but something else entirely. Something that moved through the night sky with purpose and stealth, carrying crews who'd volunteered for missions that would never appear in their official service records. When do I start? Transport arrives at 200 hours. Bring only personal items, everything else will be provided. And Kess, welcome to Phoenix Operations. Your call sign is Guardian, because that's what you've always been, whether you realized it or not. The secure connection ended, leaving Kess alone with her thoughts and the sound of mysterious aircraft conducting operations in the darkness beyond Kandahar's perimeter. She had 6 hours to prepare for a new life, one that would place her at the center of conflicts that existed in the spaces between acknowledged military operations. As she packed her few personal belongings, Kess reflected on the path that had led her from combat pilot to air traffic controller to whatever she was about to become. Each transition had been marked by loss, losing her aircraft in Iraq, losing her pilot status due to injuries, losing the comfortable anonymity of routine duties. But each loss had also revealed new capabilities, new ways to serve and protect that she'd never anticipated. At 200 hours exactly, a black helicopter touched down silently on the flight line, its rotor wash stirring dust devils in the pre-dawn darkness. No navigation lights, no radio calls, no flight plan filed with the tower. Kess climbed aboard to find Major Blackwood waiting in the passenger compartment, still wearing her flight suit from the morning's engagement. "Second thoughts?" Blackwood asked as the helicopter lifted off in turn.